So good evening, everybody. My name is Camila Cavalcanti, and I am one of Rosita's assistants, and I am a visual artist as well, and we've been collaborating for nearly 2 years now. And I will be the facilitator of this conversation tonight, this evening, with Rosita Mckenzie and Chris Roden. And so I'm just going to very quickly say a few words about Rosita. According to her own words, she's a contemporary photographer interested in the permission and denial of the visual and the interplay of dark and light. As a blind photographer, she has exhibited in solo shows across Edinburgh and in group shows throughout Scotland, including as part of the 2010 and 2012 Edinburgh Art Festival. She has also been invited to California to participate in the currently internationally touring Sight and Scene exhibition at the UCR California Museum of Photography. And also collaborating with her this evening is Chris Roden, who is a poet and an artist, a local poet and artist, and has an interest in community arts. So without further ado, I am just going to introduce the project, Bridging the Gap, that's been exhibited here at the Stockbridge Library until the end of November. And this project, first of all, I would like to thank, in Rosita's name, I would like to thank Jill and all the staff at the Stockbridge Library for the opportunity and for all the help with the exhibition. And I also would like to say that this show has been done with a collaboration of Chris Roden and also Eugene MacDonald and Kai Conduct that are not here, unfortunately. So Bridging the Gap is a photographic exhibition that celebrates Edinburgh's extensive bridge network and how even a lowly footbridge is integral to everyday's life in Scotland's capital cities. So I would like to just start with the question, Rosita. Can you please tell us how did the project start? How did the idea come about, and why you decided to do this project?
Yes, the project has been a long time coming, actually, because it was quite some years ago that Jim, my husband, responsible for a lot of things, suggested that I might like to photograph the bridges of Edinburgh, because so many people outside of Edinburgh and outside of Scotland have heard of the Forth Road Bridge and the Forth Rail Bridge, but they may not know very much about the other bridges in Edinburgh, and I didn't, I have to say. Obviously there's the usual things like the bridges that railway bridges that go over maybe roads and also flyovers and things like that over motorways. But at the time, I wasn't particularly keen until I started, undertaking the work. And I thought, well, this is actually really interesting because there are so many different bridges and so many different environments in Edinburgh. And they're so very different from each other. Then when I was thinking about another exhibition, and I always try to have a completely different theme for my exhibitions from the previous one, I thought, well, I'm actually quite enjoying photographing bridges now. And as I was, I'd recruited a team of assistants by that time, which was about, as you say, 2 years ago or so. I thought maybe photographing the bridges more seriously as a proper project. And when I heard that the new Forth Road Bridge was being constructed, or being planned at that time, and it was going to be constructed, I thought that would make a very good, a complement to what we're doing, I felt, and I planned that this exhibition would coincide with the launch of the new Queen's Ferry crossing. But unfortunately, their project has been delayed. I wonder why. Our little project has gone ahead, which I'm very pleased about. So that was the idea. And Kai, when I first met him, he had undertaken a project where he explored the city, all areas of the city, but with no-through roads. So he covered all these no-through roads around the city and got to know the city very well. And he said to me, well, I can actually take you to different areas of the city where there are some quite interesting bridges that very few people perhaps know about. And so the idea was to divide the project into 12 different areas and 12 different photo shoots. And over as I say, the last 18 months, well, it began 18 months ago, and we then, as I say, photographed different areas, not necessarily always easily, because the weather was against it, because I have to wait for when Kai was available, and so was maybe some problems there. In the meantime, I spoke to Eugene about maybe making a tactile piece and maybe an audio piece for the project, and so he was working independently on that. And of course, I like my work to be as accessible as possible, and I spoke to Chris and asked Chris if he would help me make the raised black and white prints, and I think perhaps Chris can tell us a bit more about that.
Well, Rosita introduced me to this technology, I suppose you could call it, which is quite well known and quite heavily used to produce technical drawings and diagrams and make them raised so they can be felt by visually impaired people. Also, Rosita has had people in the past make drawings of her photographs and use those in exhibition to allow her work to be accessed by a greater number of people. So Rosita shared this idea with me, and I like that idea. But for me, the strength in photography, or one strength, specifically with photography, lies in its objectivity to some extent. It may be argued we mean into subjectivity, because it's a human looking through a machine. And so I didn't want my hands to be interfering within the process. I don't want to add so much of a creative slant onto something that is Rosita's work. So the innovation that I brought to this idea was simply to find a way of printing the photographs, the straight photographs, and making raised prints in that way. Sounds very simple, but it was a lot of toing and froing, finding the right printers to use. We'll pass some of the raised prints now. Fiona, would you like to take over? So yeah, the way that the process works is that you're using a high carbon ink, as many of you will know. And as I understand it, the carbon within the ink interacts with a layer of alcohol in the paper when passed under heat to form a kind of rubberized surface. which can then be felt. The problem we had with finding a printer specifically to make A3 and larger prints was that printers now, they tend to be manufactured to dilute their ink, and the drivers that they use always direct the printer to use some kind of cyan or some kind of magenta, and so we had to find a printer that had the ability to print only black, purely only black, and to find a driver which would direct the printer only to use black. And luckily we've been successful finally in that, and so we're now able to make A3 sized images of a similar quality to the A4 images we've previously been making.
Mm-hmm. Previously to that, to make the larger images, the A3 images, we basically had to photocopy the image.
Yeah.
And well, there was difficulties with that because we didn't have our own photocopier, and that meant that we lost control of the process, didn't we?
Yeah, and you're taking it to some guys in the shop who don't necessarily know how important it is to Rosita and myself that this image turns out well. You know, and they're running things through a process all day long, so mistakes get made in terms of human error, but also the densities of the inks varied, and we got a different quality of raised to print from the photocopied images. They were much darker and more contrasty, so it wasn't really desirable.
So just kind of jumping in a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but just to kind of, I would like you guys to talk a little bit about this collaboration that you have, because Chris just said that in his case he didn't want to interfere very much creatively with the process, but of course you were creating the whole the actual prints, but he didn't want to interfere in them creatively. How does it work, Rosita, for you with other assistants and other artists that collaborate with you? How is it that your efforts are joined together to create something? How do you work with your assistants?
It really depends on the individual. Again, also depends on what my need is at that particular time, what skill I'm looking for. All my assistants, I have to say this, are very talented people in their own right, but they have strengths and interests that may vary from person to person. With Chris is very analytical in many ways, and he does a lot of research for me. So he won't undertake anything I've asked him to do unless he really understands that particular idea, or how to do the best for me, for having the best results. So a lot of our time is spent discussing exactly what I want, what my aim is, and we cover all kinds of aspects of the project as well. It's not just the raised printed images. My work, my first exhibition was held at the Inverness House at Botanic Gardens in 2006 as an experimental project initially. They were looking for a blind photographer, and I just jumped at it. And it was about 6 months after Jim first put a camera in my hand. I'm very sad to think that Inverness House is closed now, because I had 3 exhibitions there, and I've got very fond memories. And it really started my career off in many ways. I'm fascinated by the world. I haven't seen it physically for over 50 years, but to me, that's not a a disadvantage. It's actually a huge advantage in what I do, because I'm not bored with the visual world at all. I can always find something that I want to photograph, whereas a lot of people seem to take what they see for granted because it's there in front of them, I suppose, all the time. And what I also find that the people don't want necessarily to print their work up. They just want the instant image to post on Facebook or whatever, and then they maybe forget about it. But as Chris and I agree on this, that to have the hard copy and to create a memory, a lasting memory, is actually really, very, very important. And I think from previous generations, when film was used, people look back now over their lifetimes, if they see the photographs from when they were young, their relatives and all this, and happy times and all kinds of things. And, it brings back special emotions, and I think that's very important.
Just to kind of add a little bit with this, I have great interest as well in the way, in expanding the way people see photography, using the verb to see here as just in a wrong way, because it's really to experience photography. And that's what fascinates me in Rosita's work, is the way in which she's trying to convey a message, a visual message, but not using her sight, obviously. And so I would like you to elaborate a little bit on that, Rosita, on how do you experience your images when you are taking them?
Well, generally speaking, I'm working with an assistant, and that person, that's really important if I'm in an unfamiliar setting. But also, as I said, it's very important for the person to describe the setting, even if it's a familiar setting, because the environment changes with the light, or the light, different times of day. You're getting a different scene all the time throughout the day. So also, it's changing with human activity, maybe. Natural environments will be changing too. So nothing really stays still. You capture a moment, obviously, with the camera. Because I'm interested in all sorts of things, and as you said rightly, around the qualities of light and how light can affect an object or an image. I was again at the Botanical Gardens on Friday, not last Friday, Friday before, photographing the Lights in the Garden exhibition there. And that was purely for at night to try to capture the light installations and see what I could could achieve. That was the third year I've done that, and I've come back with some quite good images ultimately. At the moment, no one's seen them because T.U., who is helping me, is up north at the moment, hitchhiking her way around Inverness or somewhere, I think. But when she comes back, we'll go through those images. It's quite interesting. She said to me prior to that, well, this is the third year you're doing this, but how many times can you photograph a blue light or a blue tree? And I did think about that. So we manipulated, or she helped me manipulate the camera, put it on a lower shutter speed and that kind of thing. So I'm hoping this time the images are going to be far more abstract, and see what the result is in that. So, as I say, I'm interested in how you can play with light and light sources as well.
Yeah, that project's a very interesting project because it's about light specifically, and we were discussing the idea of presenting that solely in tactile prints, as you see here, because they have their own sort of very specific aesthetic, but also conceptually that becomes interesting because you're making something which is palpably in tactile.
Mm-hmm.
We can't feel light. You're making it actually this solid thing on paper, and I think that's sort of iconic of Rosita's practice as well, because it's about finding a vulnerability and drawing out the strength of that, the strength of vulnerability, the reversal of these relationships of light and dark.
And of course, the fact that it's a project about light, which is what basically creates images in any camera, whether it's digital or analog,
Yes.
and you are going to print them in a way that's not to be seen, it is to be felt. So I find that absolutely fascinating, and I really like this project as well. So, sorry, Rosita, you were going to say something.
I was going to say about the bridges in a way, because they're physical things. My feeling is, if they weren't there, there would be this space. This is an empty space. Again, you couldn't. I would not be able to stretch across to, say, from here to Fife, for instance, or even across the River Leith to find out what was the other side as a blind person as well. So this physical structure, it gives me the opportunity to explore, and I think I like the idea of other people maybe sharing that idea and thinking, what's over on the other side? Just the curiosity, the human curiosity of going to find out more from where they are, and maybe leaving security of where they are, of what they know, but taking a risk as well. So I think with bridges, I have a really. I'm very fond of bridges now. I keep saying it, but I am very fond of bridges now because it's an opportunity. It's an intersection, and it's it creates a chance for to go further and find out maybe about ourselves as well as individuals, but also to meet other people. And as I say, travel broadens the mind, and meeting other people certainly has broadened my mind. So yes, I think if you're a born traveller, you've got itchy feet, I think you've got to cross over the bridge.
Do you think that after photographing bridges for over 18 months, do you think you still experience them in the same way?
Well, I wouldn't. In a lot of cases, I wouldn't be experiencing the bridges only through this project, actually, because if you go over a bridge in a normal course of events, unless it's a footbridge, which then, yes, if it's a metal footbridge, you can hear the thump, thump, thump as you're going across. It makes quite a nice sound. It brings out the child in me, I like that. But in a normal course of events, if it's a larger bridge, I'm either going to be in a car or a train, or maybe even on a boat or a ship going under a bridge. and I'm not going to get to touch them. I'm not going to even be able to experience that. Other people might tell me it's there, and it might be a really spectacular bridge, but I'm not getting to. And as a blind person as well, totally blind person, my mobility is limited, so I'm reliant on other people helping me to travel around. So it's only really by undertaking this project that it has taught me an awful lot about the engineering, you know, and the purposes, and just how important they are in so many ways. And I just wonder how human society would have developed if the bridge concept had never been thought of. But as I say, they can be very iconic. Sadly as well, they can draw people, you know, I can understand why maybe people do feel a need or a desire to climb up onto the side of a bridge or whatever, maybe just to see over the side of it so they can see more clearly. But unfortunately, people do have accidents, and sometimes it's done deliberately. So that's a very sad, negative side of bridges. But maybe that's telling us something as well. I don't know. There's so many aspects of this project that could be taken further, and I think that's interesting. What do you think, Chris?
Very much so. Yeah, definitely. This is for me. This is a work in progress still, and from what you are saying now, I can hear that there's a lot more themes that this is brought out for you and your thinking, and I think if you know, if you can decide upon where you want to go next with it, and do one thing very well over the next, say, 18 months again, there's a lot more that can be got from it, and then on to the next thing again. Yeah, you know, thinking, yeah.
Is there a plan for the future then? Already kind of like putting together the next question. I was going to ask you guys about future projects that you might have together in collaboration or individually. So please, I suspect this will be another one.
Well, there is that.
Yeah.
Bridging the gap too. But Chris and I have discussed an idea that where we might actually just have an exhibition of the black and white raised prints. We haven't really explored that too much at the moment, but it's certainly something that I think is an interesting. If we could just get a bigger venue, maybe. Interested, so we can invite more people and
and maybe more artists.
Publicise it, but yes, yeah.
More artists as
so
well.
So it'd be a group show.
Yeah.
Which would be very, because I think people don't understand about the raised prints fully yet. To some extent, they're still seen as a bit of a novelty. Sight Unseen, my work that I produced in 2008, 2009 has some of the raised prints there as well. Chris, actually, that was Chris's first project with me. He created replacement images for the Sight Unseen exhibition, which has now closed in Winnipeg, but it's going on to West Virginia, and so these raised prints that, and drawings that I've had interpreting my work in the exhibition around the world, people have found them fascinating, and especially in Canada, they've got an awful lot of attention. So that's led me to think that maybe the raised images would make a good an unusual exhibition. So that's one thing, but I've got lots of other ideas. There's just not enough time and money to support them all. Does anybody want to ask any questions?
Please, we still have a couple of minutes, so if you have any questions, please.
Do you think that the changes in technology is going to help you? Like with the Apple phone and such, right? And the advances are making there, will that make you a bit more independent?
Well, I do think so, because there's apps now that are specifically designed for blind people, as you know, to help negotiate and find a way around in a way like sat-nav, but through the phone, and as I say, specifically designed for blind people. I haven't had the courage to try them myself, independently, but maybe that's because I don't really need to use them independently myself at the moment. But if I was really stuck and had no assistant, I might take the plunge. But I think the technology is improving all the time. Unfortunately, there's so much of it out there now. It's very hard to necessarily discover the right one that's going to be best for my use. But over the last 6 or 8 months, I've made a concerted effort to upload some of my images that I've taken on my phone, my iPhone, to Facebook. It doesn't yet label them for me. It doesn't actually tell me what I've necessarily taken. Well, it can tell me what I've taken in a very short description. But what I really need is an app that tells me what I'm actually about to take, not what I've actually taken.
Yeah.
Because if I tend to take more than, I take several at a time, because I'm not sure that I've captured the image exactly in the right position, that kind of thing. So I do need assistance to go through, as you well know, to go through all those extra images that are superfluous to my requirements, really. So if there was an app that could tell me straight away, firstly what I'm pointing at and whether it's come out well, and give me a description automatically of what I've taken. But then I wouldn't have these guys to work with, would I? So I mustn't go too far down that road.
I was going to ask just now, what is this balance that you think? If you could be completely independent to take pictures, because you were saying before how much your experience of a place also depends on this person that's with you, and so how do you think that would change if you were completely independent? And would you like to do that?
Actually, no, I wouldn't. Strangely, I wouldn't want to be. Because a lot of the pleasure I get is actually the people I work with, the people I meet. For instance, Camilla is very good at going up to complete strangers and saying to them, "Would you mind if Rosita takes your photograph?" I mean, I could possibly do that, but I might shy away from it. But it's the interaction with people. When they realise what I'm trying to do, then usually are very, very cooperative and very, willing to help and very interested in what I'm doing. So I think I would miss that, because there could be a tendency, possibly, if I was totally independent, of just taking things from a distance and being at arm's length. My work is about involvement, and it's the whole body, whole mind, whole spirit involvement. And as I say, one of the biggest, I like the connection. I like making connections, either with objects that I've not really thought about, and also certainly people, and places. And if I was able just to take photographs at will, I think it would change my photography. Maybe it would probably, I feel, diminish it in many ways, because it's a different process.
Yeah, it's almost opposite to the way a lot of photographers function.
Yes.
In the photographer is the lone wolf.
Yes.
They go around on their own.
Mm-hmm.
But you, I think, like me, also are a born collaborator.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I get a lot of joy from the collaboration process as well.
Yeah.
There's, I don't believe in the idea of an auteur. That there can be someone, in terms of visual imagery, who can bring more to an individual project than two people. It's like the sum of the parts is greater than the parts on their own. Very clumsily phrased.
I also like the experience of being challenged, and not just discussing the work, making me explain what I mean as well, but hearing other people's ideas, really important to me, because as I say, my collaborators are very talented people, have lots of ideas I haven't thought of, and even if I was fully sighted or had all this wonderful technology that wasn't too heavy to carry around, probably even then I'd only be working with my thoughts and not exchanging ideas. And as I say, so again, come back to this image of the bridge, a meeting of minds. So bridging that particular gap as well. So.
Yeah, so
You do it very articulately, I have to say. Just fascinating.
Thank you.
Rosita, can I just ask, because
Yeah.
you and Chris talk about the pictures, I've never seen that kind of raised effect. It's really nice actually, it's quite impressive. Just when you talk about that during mention technology, have you done anything with sort of 3D printers and things like that? I mean, I'm not that familiar with them, but I wonder if that kind of does maybe similar type things on my foot another edge in it.
That is something that we have spoken about, haven't we, Chris?
Yeah.
There are places in Edinburgh that do 3D printing. We haven't explored that yet. That is an idea. I've also got, because I think it's very important to have some sound as well, where possible. That's why we're trying to make a recording now, using the iPhone technology. But I don't know if it will work. But as a virtual reality experience as well, it might help to explain why I wanted to take photographs and what I experienced in a given location, perhaps, and just helping people to relate to what I'm doing a bit better, and especially other visually disabled people that don't necessarily have the chance to go out and do what I'm doing.
It's interesting to see stuff like that, because it was kind of excited to do that, but just to see someone putting it in kind of such an impressive way, like I think I feel like a lot of people were, I can't remember the last time I printed a photograph out, I've got my computer would have 10,000, 20,000 prints, and I think that puts you off looking at photos a lot.
Yes.
A lot of the time, you take all these pictures, and when you take a picture and you go on holiday in all these different places, and you maybe look at them on your phone, or you look at them once when you come back, and I think you really miss out on the magic of them, I guess, because you never put them out. I mean, I often would just sit down, or Joanne sits down, and you just kind of start flicking through, and he's like, oh God, look, come and look at this, come and look at this. You know, I've not seen that picture for years, so
Yeah,
to see someone put it
exactly.
down, and especially some of the effects and the way you can do it, just makes it look really effective and nice. It's it's amazing to see, actually.
And to be honest, since the first time Rosita showed me these raised prints, I always thought they actually look absolutely incredible, like visually too. Not just the fact that you can feel them, you can touch them, but I also think that visually the effect is just absolutely beautiful. I'm very, very interested in it. In addition to the engaging aspect of it, but also just visually, I think they're also very interesting.
Is it quite an expensive technology to do? Is it?
Not really. No, when you get the right printer. It's buying the wrong printer and having to send it back and get the money refunded. In time and frustration.
Man hours.
Yes,
So
exactly.
they're on kind of home-based printers, or are you talking about print shops that...
Yeah, home-based printers. But as I say, you've got to tell them in the right way what to do.
Mm.
So we're using a driver software called QTR, which we discovered after long research, which is specifically designed to produce black and white images, which will make your average photographer happy because they've got no cast on them. So luckily we found that, and we've got some specific inks that we will use that are carbon rich. They're supposed to be 100% carbon as well. Luckily this technology that we use, we're able to use your average ink as well.
But unfortunately, it's not necessarily that easy to come by, is it, Chris? Actual ink, you have to send abroad to it for it, don't you?
Yeah, the carbon rich ink.
Yeah.
I think Chris himself and his techniques is a huge advance that I've seen in your work
Yeah.
in recent times. Working in this sort of field myself over the last 20 years, I used to have to produce raised diagrams and colleges for economics and such like. And they were a nightmare because we had to draw them out with a special pen. Anytime we tried to take a photograph, it came in a mess when we raised it. The way you capture the detail, I've never seen it before in any of these productions ever. As I said before, our ones were just a complete mess. So it's saving a lot of time. I know you've got a lot of time into it, but now you've perfected it. It's saving so much time.
Yeah. Good.
Where would they actually printed them?
So we've got Rosita has purchased a printer which lives in my office cum studio at home. It's an R1800 Epson printer, if you're interested in making some at home.
And who visits them?
I do as well. I've got Rosita's Zychem swell machine at my house, so just wait a day for the ink to dry, and then I just pop them through the machine, the heating machine.
Yes, that's very important
Yeah.
about I didn't know, in the past, we've had, early on, we had bubbling, and I didn't know what it was. And when Chris came across this bubbling effect, when it's been through, the image has gone through the heating, the Zychem machine, we didn't understand. But again, Chris went and did his research, and he discovered it was because the ink wasn't dry enough. And so it's very important to make sure it's thoroughly dry before you put it through through the machine, so it, you get the best results possible. Because what happened many years ago, before I was working with Chris, the girl I was working with drew onto the paper, the swell paper, so she only had one copy. She only had her original copy. And she put it through the machine, and of course the ink wasn't dry and it bubbled up. So that image was completely wasted. She didn't have a means of protecting her original copy. But Chris has discovered, how to do it. That is why we were started to use the photocopying technique. But as Chris said, you could go to a photocopy and a shop. They do photocopying, and they haven't got enough ink in the machine, so it only comes out, in patches or something. And they don't realise that because it's only cheap for them, to produce. They don't realise how important it is for the tank, the ink tank, to be properly filled up and that sort of thing. So we very much needed, to spend money so that we could have control over the process.
But the most valuable aspect, funnily enough, is the software. Because there's many printers that it will work with. So QTR software, download that from an open source website for around about £50. If you look at the list of printers that it's compatible with, you should be largely okay.
Any more questions? Everybody's shy.
Yes.
I've got one.
Oh, you has got it. There we are. There we go. That's all right.
One of the most ambitious things you ever tried was to reproduce fireworks in ceramic.
Ah,
Yeah?
yes.
Would you ever think of, I know you always put in other senses, so you can't invent a new one, but vibration, you ever thought of doing any with vibration to try and...
Well, actually, yes. I'm actually really interested to try all kinds of things. I think it's very important. That's an interesting thought. I haven't thought of vibration before, but again, with the virtual reality, you could building all sorts of things with that. But I do still think there will be a place for the raised prints. There will be a place for sound, and I've envisaged this as being a completely different experience for people, especially for people with poor sight or no sight at all. At the moment, visual art is not accessible normally, unless someone's taken time to do interpretations. Having a description of something is good, and especially if you have it by somebody who's knowledgeable, and you can ask questions, that sort of thing. So a live describer is often, for me, much better than a recorded description, although recorded descriptions are very good as well. But it gives you a chance to interact. But I still feel if you don't have the tactile aspect as well, then people like myself, who are totally blind, are losing out. You can't store all that information in your head. And after a while, I become mentally drained, purely listening to descriptions. But if I've got something to touch, it helps with the description. I think it's also hard on the describer to try and find the exact words that convey the description, to reflect it, convey the visual image. And that is quite hard for some people. But there's all sorts of, I think we have to use all our senses, the senses we have available to us, to get a more rounded experience, and that's what I feel with my photography and with my artwork generally. It's given me the opportunity to be immersed in what I'm doing, and I want to share that experience, that kind of experience, with other people as much as I can, and especially people who haven't had access to the art, and it doesn't just mean visually disabled people, it might be other people. So different locations is important as well. And I think over the years there's been some very interesting experiments with presenting art and interactive art to the community. And I just one of the things I would like to do, and it's quite it's obviously impossible unless I have a model of a building, and especially a more spectacular building, as I say, like a bridge or whatever. It's it's too big to feel in its entirety. So I would like somewhere to work with somebody who is able to help me appreciate the magnificence of some of these buildings, some of these structures, whatever they are. I mean, you can explain to me till the cows come home how magnificent the Sydney Opera House is, but I haven't got much idea. I can only imagine maybe a little bit of it, and not necessarily in detail. But if I had a model, maybe I'd be able to experience that better and get an overall view. But it wouldn't be, it's not the same as going into the Sydney Opera House, but where I've got the whole building around me. But I do get, because I tend to get overwhelmed with big spaces. I'm overwhelmed with big buildings, so cathedrals and things. Again, this is where I need my sat-nav to help me around and tell me where I am and what I'm looking at and all kinds of things. So I can see that the technology could really help us in a big way, but it needs the people, the creative people who are building these and designing these apps and things, to understand the requirements, I'd love to be able to work with people that have that knowledge and that training, because I think it could benefit so many people, not just in this country but around the world as well. And when I know that my raised prints and raised drawings were so well received in Winnipeg, as I say, the Canadians went absolutely potty over them, and it's inspired other blind photographers now to try and get their work interpreted in different ways. So I think that, from a very little acorn, that idea has taken root. So I'd like to explore all kinds of methods, and because, as I say, there are people like Fiona, for instance, who's doing raised drawings and raised prints of her own using the technology, and I'd be interested to know what Fiona feels about it, what she feels how she could maybe adapt, maybe even to other methods. But I don't know if Fiona heard me. Did you hear me, Fiona?
How would technology affect your practice as an artist?
Actually, now she might tell you more about materials.
old school. So you're very much on the side of the analog. That makes sense to me.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
I can relate to that.
And enjoy the use of that very much. Exploring more ways to enhance it.
It's always a way of solving a problem, I suppose. For me, it's a means to an end, and I don't know how I can use like this concept of that technology until I've got a problem that I need to solve, and then that leads me to where I might have to use some new technology, I suppose.
It was actually very interesting. Chris and I, when we first started working together, the thing that Chris did, or helped me to do, was transfer some of my images onto stones. He even gathered the stones from Edinburgh beaches for me, so that they could be my Berlin images of the Berlin Jewish Memorial for the International Holocaust Day. And as I say, Chris showed me how to do that. Now, I didn't know how that was done, but he took pains to show me, and that actually was that was an interesting idea. It was not a way, I couldn't feel the prints, they weren't raised in any way, but there might come a time when a similar technique with the materials could be, as you say, about 3D printing, but in this particular case it was very relevant that the images of the memorial should actually be on stone, which I really like because it brought it home very much to me, and it was my project. How it made it more sensitive in some respects. I know stone is not classed as being sensitive, but the fact that you have memorial stones, to take a stone from the beaches here in Edinburgh, and it really made a real connection for me. So there's lots of different materials I'd like to use, and in different ways, and exciting ways. I think my work will always be experimental. I hope it will be anyway. I don't want to get bored with it, and I don't think I will.
Oh, I think that's a good way to kind of to live the conversation, like in the sense that you're always hoping to experiment with new things and bring your artwork to all these different paths and possible ways to do, which I find it quite interesting. It's very challenging, to say the least. So I like that. So, do we have any other questions?
It's quite mind-boggling, just to bridge the gap between the way you see things and the way we see things. So thank you very much. Fascinating.
Well, before we end, I want to say that Camilla has got a show opening very soon. Can you tell us something about that, Camilla?
Yes, I have a show that we will open on the 25th of November in White Space, which is in Howe Street, quite close to here, just parallel to Dundas Street. And it's a show, it's a collaboration between myself and an Australian artist, Jenna Corcoran. But my work, because I'm a photographer, I'm a visual artist that uses photography, but as Rosita, I too am interested on thinking photography beyond the imagery. So my images are of photography and sea glass, Scottish sea glass that I've been collecting over the years. And so they're very much tactile.
Yes. Yes.
They're very much tactile. Even though I think that people generally, unless I'm there to tell them to touch it, people feel very shy and they don't tend to touch it. But I don't mind if people touch it, even though they're going to be in the walls. But I definitely would encourage people to touch them.
Can you explain a little bit about the one you showed
concept,
me
yeah.
when the concept of the sea glass and your
And the
home
image,
in
yeah.
Brazil? Yes.
It's because as an artist, I'm very interested in the idea of how one thing that's very private to a person or to myself, how people relate to that in a public level. And so this relationship in between what's mine and what's public, or what's intimate and what's universal in a way. And so I come from Brazil, as I said, and my hometown is a coast town as well. And so I have taken pictures of the ocean, of the sea at home. And because I have collected all the sea glass, I developed a technique to juxtapose the sea glass over the photography, so that to see the photo you have to see through the sea glass. And so, but you see it's obviously the sea glass being on the ocean and on the sand for many years. They are worn off and they are not absolutely transparent. And so you see the pictures, but you don't see them as you would have seen if it was just the image. They are partially obstructed. But I have tried also to create a relationship between the image themselves and the sea glass, kind of color coding them and choosing shapes that has something to do with this sort of mosaic that I created over the images. And I like to think that as I did, I like to think that the sea glass, as I did, have traveled the world and have ended up in Scotland. You know? So it is like so to see. It's almost like my two homes put together. It's where I am now, and it's where I've always been from.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So you're all welcome to the opening. It's on the 25th of November. At 6 p.m. But the exhibition will go on until the 1st of December, so you're more than welcome to come. From 10 to 5:30 p.m. Thank you very much.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I have to run. But
Yes.
Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for all of you who came,
Yes.
and thank you, Rosita, for the wonderful work that you have presented to us. Thank you, Chris, and of course, thank you for your time, and thank you all for coming.
Yes. Thank you. I'm going to clap down.
Good.
Excellent. Now, I'll let Chris have a little.
We borrowed it.